September 10, 1944, 10 a.m., SHAEF headquarters, Granville, France. The air inside the converted villa is thick with the smell of stale coffee, expensive Turkish tobacco, and the damp, salty breeze blowing in from the English Channel. On the wall, a massive map of Northwest Europe is pinned tight, crisscrossed with red and blue grease pencils that mark the agonizingly slow progress of the Allied machine. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Ike, rubs his temples. He hasn't slept more than 4 hours a night since the breakout from Normandy. To his left stands Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, a man who carries himself with the rigid, prickly precision of a Victorian schoolmaster. Monty isn't just a soldier. He is a national symbol of British resilience. He stands with his hands behind his back, his eyes fixed on a single point on the map, the Ruhr, Germany's industrial heart. Outside, the rain streaks the windows, blurring the view of the military police standing guard. You can almost feel the vibration of the heavy supply trucks rattling past the villa, carrying the lifeblood of an army fuel that is rapidly running dry. The tension in the room is physical. It's a collision of two worlds. Eisenhower, the supreme commander, is a broad front man. He wants to squeeze Germany like a vice, pushing all armies forward simultaneously to deny the Wehrmacht a chance to counterattack. But Montgomery sees this as a recipe for a bloody, protracted stalemate. He has a different plan, a pencil-like thrust, a single massive strike into the heart of the Reich that he believes will end the war by Christmas. "Ike," Montgomery says, his voice thin and sharp as a razor, "if you continue with this broad front, you will fail. You will not only fail, you will prolong this slaughter by a year." The room goes dead silent. Subordinates hold their breath. It isn't just a disagreement over geography. It's an indictment of Eisenhower's leadership. Montgomery leans over the table, his finger stabbing at the bridgehead at Arnhem. He isn't asking for a change in strategy. He is demanding it. He wants every drop of gasoline, every shell, and every spare paratrooper diverted away from the Americans in the South and given to him in the North. Eisenhower looks up, his jaw set. He knows that if he gives Monty everything, he risks leaving General Patton's Third Army stranded and vulnerable. He knows the American public and the American generals won't stand for being sidelined while a British commander takes the glory of Berlin. "Monty," Eisenhower begins, his voice deceptively calm, "you can't speak to me like that. I'm your boss." But the field marshal isn't finished. He is about to deliver a critique so biting it will threaten to shatter the Anglo-American alliance before the first Allied boot even touches German soil. September 10, 1944, 10:45 a.m., SHAEF headquarters. The silence following Eisenhower's rebuke is heavy, punctuated only by the distant rhythmic thud of a generator outside. Montgomery doesn't flinch. For a fleeting second, the Spartan general looks at the supreme commander not as a superior, but as a misguided amateur. Montgomery withdraws a folded sheet of paper from his pocket, his own personal assessment of the supply crisis. He knows the math of war better than anyone. The Allied Red Ball Express is exhausted. Tires are shredding on French roads, and the ports are still choked with wreckage. There isn't enough fuel to power two offensives. To Monty, Eisenhower's broad front isn't a strategy. It's a political compromise that wastes lives for the sake of keeping every general happy. "I am simply telling you the military facts, Ike," Montgomery snaps, his tone softening only a fraction. "We are at a crossroads. If we try to be strong everywhere, we will be strong nowhere." He leans over the map, his pointer hovering over the lower Rhine. He begins to outline what will become Operation Market Garden. It is a plan of staggering audacity. A carpet of 3 airborne divisions drop behind enemy lines to seize the bridges, followed by a lightning armored thrust. It is a gamble that goes against everything the cautious, methodical Montgomery usually stands for. You can see the calculation in Eisenhower's eyes. He is under immense pressure from Washington to end the war quickly. The V-2 rockets are beginning to rain down on London, and the American public is weary. If Monty is right, if a single concentrated left hook can collapse the German defense, can he afford not to take the chance? But then comes the friction. Eisenhower confirms his decision. The broad front remains. He will allow Montgomery's operation to proceed, but he will not halt Patton in the south. He will try to do both. Montgomery's face turns a pale, mottled red. To him, this is the ultimate betrayal of military logic. He looks at the map of the Siegfried Line, the West Wall, and sees a meat grinder. He turns to Eisenhower and utters the words that would haunt their relationship for decades. If you do this, you are handing the Germans the initiative on a silver platter. You are giving them the winter. The room temperature seems to drop. Eisenhower's chief of staff, Bedell Smith, shifts uncomfortably, his hand resting on the hilt of his sidearm. The unity of the Western Allies is fraying at the very moment it needs to be steel. Montgomery gathers his papers, his movements jerky and precise. He has won the approval for his great gamble in the Netherlands, but he has lost the battle for the soul of the Allied strategy. As he prepares to leave, he looks back at the map one last time. He knows something Eisenhower hasn't yet accepted. The German army, though retreating, is not yet broken. And as the rain turns into a torrential downpour, the first orders for the airborne jump are signaled out. The dice have been thrown, but the man who proposed the gamble is already convinced that the man leading the war has just made his greatest mistake. September 12, 1944. 2 days after the confrontation. Montgomery's tactical HQ, Blaye, France. Montgomery sits in his mobile office, a converted Leyland bus surrounded by silence and the smell of lavender water he uses to mask the scent of war. On the table before him lies a photograph of the bridge at Arnhem. To the world, he is the hero of El Alamein, the man who bested Rommel. But inside this bus, away from the cameras, Monty is a man haunted by the ghosts of 1914. He remembers the mud of the Somme. He remembers the senseless, grinding attrition of a broad front that moved only yards at the cost of thousands of lives. This is the root of his rage. To Montgomery, Eisenhower's refusal to concentrate everything in the North isn't just a strategic disagreement, it is a moral failure. He views the American approach as mass over maneuver, a blunt instrument that will eventually win, but only by bleeding the Allied armies dry. His staff officers enter the bus, treading lightly. They find the field marshal staring out the window at the gray French sky. He begins to dictate a letter to London, his voice thin and clinical. He writes of his grave concern for the Supreme Commander's grasp of the tactical situation. In Monty's mind, Ike is a coordinator, a politician in a 4-star uniform who understands committees but doesn't understand the feel of a battlefield. The Americans, Montgomery mutters to an aide, have no idea what is waiting for them in the dark forests of the borderlands. The friction has now seeped down through the ranks. In the mess tents, British officers mock the perceived slowness of the American supply chain, while American G's grumble about the arrogance of the British High Command. The Grand Alliance is starting to look like a collection of rival factions, held together only by a common enemy. But while Montgomery broods over Eisenhower's broad front, a terrifying reality is beginning to emerge from the intelligence reports crossing his desk. Ultra intercepts suggest that the German 9th and 10th SS Panzer Division's units, thought to be decimated, are refitting near Arnhem. It is the very place Montgomery has chosen for his narrow thrust. If Eisenhower had given him the everything he demanded, perhaps he could have overwhelmed them. But with his resources split and his relationship with Ike at a breaking point, Montgomery is forced to make a choice. Acknowledge the danger and call for a delay, or push forward to prove that his narrow thrust is the only way to win. He looks at the clock. Every hour Eisenhower spends reinforcing the South is an hour the Germans spend digging in. The ego of the field marshal and the caution of the supreme commander are now locked in a death spiral, and the paratroopers of the 1st Airborne are already checking their silk chutes. September 17, 1944, 10 a.m., over the English Channel. The sky is filled with a low, rhythmic thrum that vibrates through the very bone marrow of every man inside the C-47 transport planes. Thousands of parachutes, like giant white dandelions, are about to bloom over the Dutch countryside. This is the commencement of Market Garden Montgomery's narrow thrust, the plan he practically bullied Eisenhower into approving. Back at his headquarters, Montgomery is uncharacteristically restless. He has staked his entire reputation on this move. He told Eisenhower that this would zip up the war. But as the first reports of the drop come in, the friction he warned Ike about starts to manifest in ways he hadn't anticipated. The radio begins to crackle with panicked fragments. The broad front that Montgomery loathed meant that resources were spread thin, and now the consequences are hitting the ground at terminal velocity. The British 1st Airborne has dropped directly on top of 2 SS Panzer divisions. The minor resistance Monty's staff promised has turned into a steel wall of Tiger tanks and veteran infantry. You can almost see the sweat on the brow of the radio operators as the signal from Arnhem begins to fade. The bridge is too far, the whisper begins to circulate. In a rare moment of introspection, Montgomery realizes the trap he has built for himself. By criticizing Eisenhower's caution so publicly, he has left himself no room for failure. If Market Garden fails, it isn't just a tactical defeat. It is the death of his strategic vision. He had told Ike that a single concentrated strike would end the war. Now, that strike is being blunted by the very refitting Germans he chose to ignore in his rush to prove Eisenhower wrong. Meanwhile, at SHAEF, Eisenhower watches the pins on the map with a grim, stoic silence. He doesn't say, "I told you so." He doesn't have to. The broad front, for all its perceived slowness, provided a safety net. Montgomery's narrow thrust has no safety net. It is a tightrope walk over an abyss. As night falls over the Rhine, the reports turn from optimistic to dire. The British paratroopers are trapped in a shrinking perimeter, their ammunition running low, listening for the sound of Horrocks, the 30th Corps tanks that are currently bogged down on a single, narrow road, exactly the kind of bottleneck Eisenhower feared. Montgomery sits in his Leyland bus, the map of the Ruhr still pinned to the wall. The industrial heart of Germany, once seemingly within his grasp, now feels 1,000 miles away. He realizes that in his battle of wills with Eisenhower, he may have won the argument, but he is losing the war. The cliffhanger is no longer about a map or a strategy. It's about survival. Because as the sun sets on Arnhem, the question isn't whether the war will end by Christmas. It's whether the 1st Airborne will exist by morning.